Imagine a world where thousands of Roman ships were just playthings for pirates. Picture corsairs from Africa raiding as far north as Iceland, snatching people from their homes. Think of a city so overflowing with pirate gold, it was called the richest and wickedest place on earth before it vanished into the sea. One band of sea rovers even dared to kidnap a young Julius Caesar and held him for a hefty ransom. Some pirates dreamed bigger, attempting to build a perfect society of equals, free from kings and slavery on a remote island. These weren't just scattered gangs. They were organized forces, republics of renegades that, if they ever joined forces, could have rewritten maps and terrified empires into submission. Number 6. The Cilician Pirate State, Rome's nightmare on the high seas. Long before Jack Sparrow, there were the Cilicians. These weren't just a few rogue ships. They were a massive, organized power that dominated the Mediterranean Sea for decades, especially in the 1st century BC. Think of them as a sprawling, unofficial empire built on plunder. Their home base was Cilicia, a rugged coastal region in what is now Turkey, full of hidden coves and mountain fortresses perfect for pirate lairs. But their reach extended far, far beyond. At their peak, the Cilicians were said to command over 1,000 ships. That's a navy bigger than many actual countries had at the time. They didn't just stick to one type of vessel either. They had light, fast ships called lembi and myoperones, perfect for surprise attacks and quick getaways. These weren't clumsy pirate tubs. They were purpose-built for terror. They also controlled, or at least operated freely from, around 400 coastal towns, settlements, and strongholds scattered across the Mediterranean. This network gave them places to resupply, sell their loot, and recruit more men. It was a state within many states. Their operations were sophisticated. They didn't just randomly attack ships. They disrupted vital grain supplies to Rome, causing food shortages and panic in the capital of the world's superpower. They raided islands and coastal cities, carrying off not just goods, but people. Kidnapping for ransom was a huge part of their business. Their most famous, or infamous, captive was a young Julius Caesar. The story goes that when they told him his ransom was 20 talents of silver, Caesar laughed and said he was worth at least 50. He even joked with them, bossed them around, and promised to crucify them all once he was free, which he later did, by the way. The Cilicians had their own sanctuaries, arsenals, and signal systems. They even had fortified islands that acted as major bases. One such pirate leader, Xenocites, was so entrenched that he set himself and his entire fortress on fire rather than be captured by the Romans. They were bold enough to raid the Italian coast itself, even attacking the port of Ostia, Rome's own harbor. Imagine the audacity. They plundered temples, kidnapped Roman officials, and generally made a mockery of Roman authority. Their society, while not a republic in the way Nassau later was, had a strong sense of cohesion and organization. They were a federation of pirate communities, often working together under powerful chieftains. This unity made them incredibly difficult to deal with. Rome tried various piecemeal campaigns against them for years, but the pirates just melted away and reappeared elsewhere. So, what could the Cilicians bring to a united pirate nation? First, unparalleled ancient naval expertise. These guys knew the Mediterranean like the back of their hand, from its currents to its hidden coves. They understood large-scale fleet operations and logistics. They'd contribute thousands of experienced sailors and hardened fighters. Their knowledge of shipbuilding, particularly for swift raiding vessels, would be invaluable. Furthermore, their history of controlling territory and establishing a network of bases across a vast sea would provide a blueprint for the United Nations' own expansion and control of key waterways. They knew how to intimidate empires and extract resources, a crucial skill for any aspiring pirate superpower. Their legacy was one of defiance on a grand scale, proving that even the mightiest empires could be challenged from the sea. Their experience in siege warfare, both attacking and defending fortified positions, would also be a massive asset. Rome eventually had to give General Pompey unprecedented powers and a massive fleet, some 500 ships and 120,000 men, to finally crush them in 67 to 66 BC. That's the kind of threat they were. Number 5. The Republic of Salé, Barbary, terror from the Atlantic. For centuries, the very words Barbary Corsair struck fear into the hearts of Mediterranean and Atlantic coastal dwellers. The Republic of Salé, centered around the twin cities of Salé and Rabat in modern-day Morocco, was one of the most notorious and long-lasting hubs of this activity, particularly in the 17th century. This wasn't just piracy, it was state-sponsored, or at least state-tolerated, raiding that shaped international relations for hundreds of years. The Salé Rovers, as they were known, were a formidable force. Their primary targets were Christian ships and coastal settlements throughout the Mediterranean, the Atlantic coast of Europe, and even as far north as Iceland. Yes, Iceland. In 1627, corsairs, including men from Salé, raided Iceland, capturing hundreds of people to be sold in the slave markets of North Africa or ransomed. Imagine living in a remote Icelandic fishing village and suddenly being attacked by pirates from Morocco. The psychological impact was immense. These weren't disorganized ruffians. The Republic of Salé, especially during its peak of autonomy in the early to mid-17th century, had a sophisticated political structure. It was effectively an independent city-state, run by a council of 14 pirate captains, known as the Diwan. They made their own laws, negotiated treaties, sometimes even with European powers who hoped to protect their own shipping, and managed the vast wealth flowing in from plunder and the slave trade. They had their own harbor defenses, shipyards, and a thriving economy built almost entirely on their corsair activities. One of the most famous Salé corsairs was Jan Janzoen van Haarlem, a Dutchman who converted to Islam and became known as Murat Reis the Younger. He was a highly successful captain, leading expeditions far into the Atlantic. He even became an admiral and governor of Salé. His story shows how these corsair communities were surprisingly cosmopolitan, attracting renegades and adventurers from all over Europe who were willing to convert and join the lucrative raiding business. The scale of their operations was staggering. Historians estimate that from the 16th to the 19th century, Barbary corsairs, including those from Salé, Algiers, Tunis, and Tripoli, captured and enslaved between 1 million and 1.25 million Europeans. This wasn't just about stealing gold. It was about human trafficking on an industrial scale. Captives were paraded through the streets, sold in markets, or held for ransom. Entire religious orders like the Trinitarians and Mercedarians were founded in Europe specifically to raise money and negotiate the release of these captives. Their ships were often xebecs and galleys, fast maneuverable vessels, well suited for the Mediterranean and for coastal raids. They were experts at boarding actions and close-quarters combat. They also understood the political landscape, often operating under the nominal authority of the Moroccan Sultan, but maintaining a high degree of independence. If the Republic of Salé joined a united pirate nation, they would bring centuries of institutional knowledge about sustained corsair warfare. They knew how to manage a slave economy for maximum profit, a brutal but effective source of revenue and labor. Their diplomatic experience, however coercive, in dealing with European states would be invaluable. They knew how to play empires against each other. Their reach into the Atlantic and their legendary long-distance raids would expand the United Nations operational theater significantly. Sail would contribute skilled shipwrights, battle-hardened sailors used to both Mediterranean and Atlantic conditions, and a tradition of disciplined council-based governance. They also understood how to create fear on a continental scale, a powerful tool for any pirate state. Their long-term survival, weathering centuries of conflict, demonstrated a resilience and adaptability that would be crucial. They knew how to build and maintain fortified port cities capable of withstanding sieges, and their network of contacts throughout North Africa and the Ottoman Empire would be a strategic advantage. Number 4. Tortuga, the wild buccaneer brotherhood. Before Nassau became the poster child for pirate republics, there was Tortuga. This small island off the northwest coast of Hispaniola, modern-day Haiti, was the original Caribbean pirate stronghold, a name synonymous with ruthless buccaneers and brutal raids against the Spanish Empire in the mid to late 17th century. Tortuga, meaning Turtle Island, due to its shape, was a thorn in Spain's side for decades. It started as a refuge for castaways and hunters, French, English, and Dutch, who lived on Hispaniola hunting wild cattle and boar. The Spanish tried to drive them out by slaughtering the animals, which only pushed these men, known as buccaneers, from the native word bucan, a wooden frame for smoking meat, towards piracy as a means of survival and revenge. Tortuga, with its natural harbor and strategic location near the Windward Passage, a major shipping route for Spanish galleons, became their perfect base. The Brethren of the Coast, as the buccaneers often called themselves, developed a unique social structure. It was a rough democracy. They had elected captains, shared their plunder according to agreed-upon articles, the chasse partie, and had a system of compensation for injuries sustained in battle, a kind of early workers' comp for pirates. Loyalty within the Brotherhood was fierce, though their methods were notoriously cruel, especially towards the Spanish. Tortuga was a chaotic, violent, but thriving place. It was a melting pot of nationalities, united by their hatred of Spain and their love of freedom and plunder. Governors sent by France often tried to control the buccaneers, sometimes successfully turning them into privateers for French interests, other times failing, as the buccaneers simply did what they pleased. Figures like Jean Levasseur, an engineer who built the formidable Fort de Rocher overlooking Tortuga's harbor, initially brought order but also facilitated piracy. Legendary buccaneers, like François l'Olonnais, operated from Tortuga. L'Olonnais was infamous for his extreme cruelty towards Spanish prisoners, reportedly even tearing out a man's heart. While horrific, his brutality also instilled terror in Spanish garrisons, sometimes making them surrender without a fight. Henry Morgan, before his later fame operating from Port Royal, also had early connections and dealings with the buccaneers of Tortuga. The economy of Tortuga ran on stolen goods. Taverns, gambling dens, and merchants dealing in plundered treasure flourished. It was a place where a common sailor could become rich overnight or lose it all just as quickly. The French eventually asserted more direct control over Tortuga, and its importance as an independent pirate haven waned as other locations like Port Royal rose to prominence. But its legacy as the original Wild West of the Caribbean endured. In a united pirate nation, Tortuga's contribution would be its hardened core of buccaneers. These were men skilled in guerrilla warfare, amphibious assaults, and surviving in harsh conditions. They were masters of the surprise attack, using small, fast boats to overwhelm larger Spanish vessels and coastal towns. Their Brethren of the Coast tradition provided an early model for pirate democracy and codes of conduct which could influence the United Nations laws. Tortuga would bring a fierce anti-imperial spirit, particularly anti-Spanish, and a wealth of knowledge about operating in the Caribbean. Their skills in hunting, preserving food, bocan, and navigating the complex island chains would be essential. They also represented a spirit of fierce independence and a willingness to fight to the death for their way of life. The sheer terror their name inspired would be a psychological weapon for the united pirate nation. Tortuga would be the shock troops, the wild heart of the pirate alliance. Number 3. Port Royal, the richest and wickedest city on earth. For a time in the latter half of the 17th century, Port Royal, Jamaica, held the notorious title of the richest and wickedest city in the world. It wasn't an exaggeration. This bustling port became the main English base for privateers and pirates, raiding the fabulously wealthy Spanish Main. While technically under English control, for many years it operated as a de facto pirate republic, where buccaneers could openly sell their plunder, refit their ships, and spend their fortunes with abandon. Located at the end of a long sand spit enclosing a large natural harbor, now Kingston Harbor, Port Royal was perfectly positioned to prey on Spanish shipping routes. After England captured Jamaica from Spain in 1655, the early English governors lacked sufficient naval forces to defend the island. So they did the next best thing. They invited the buccaneers to use Port Royal as a base. These were the Brethren of the Coast, many migrating from Tortuga, who were granted letters of marque, official licenses to attack enemy shipping, against the Spanish. The most famous figure associated with Port Royal is Sir Henry Morgan, though technically a privateer operating with the Crown's blessing, at least initially. His methods and men were pure buccaneer. Morgan launched devastating raids from Port Royal against major Spanish cities like Portobello, Maracaibo, and most audaciously, Panama. The wealth that flowed back into Port Royal from these expeditions was immense. Gold, silver, jewels, silks, and enslaved people were common sights. Port Royal became a boomtown. It was said that 1 out of every 4 buildings was a tavern or a brothel. The city was crammed with warehouses, overflowing with looted goods, wealthy merchants, shipwrights, artisans, and of course, thousands of pirates eager to spend their ill-gotten gains. Prices were high, but so was the availability of every conceivable luxury and vice. Coins from all over the world circulated freely. Pirates would reportedly spend thousands of pieces of 8 in a single night of revelry. The city's defenses were formidable, designed to protect it from Spanish retaliation. However, this pirate paradise was not to last. On June 7, 1692, a massive earthquake, followed by a tsunami, struck Port Royal. Much of the city, built on unstable sand, literally liquefied and slid into the harbor. Thousands died instantly. Many at the time saw it as divine retribution for the city's wickedness. While a portion of Port Royal survived and was rebuilt, its golden age as a pirate haven was over. The disaster, combined with changing English policies, less tolerant of outright piracy, shifted the center of pirate activity elsewhere. If Port Royal were to join a united pirate nation, its contribution would be, first and foremost, wealth. The sheer amount of capital and resources that had passed through Port Royal demonstrated the economic potential of organized plunder on a grand scale. This experience could fund the United Nations Treasury, allowing it to build ships, pay its members, and bribe officials. Port Royal also represented a successful, for a time, model of a pirate-friendly port city, with developed infrastructure, docks, warehouses, repair facilities, and a network of merchants willing to deal in stolen goods. Its strategic Caribbean location and the knowledge gained from years of raiding the Spanish Main would be invaluable. The legends of figures like Henry Morgan would inspire new generations of pirates within the United Nations, showing the heights of power and wealth that could be achieved. Port Royal would be the financial powerhouse and the logistical hub, a testament to what pirates could build when they had a safe haven and a steady stream of loot. It also offered a lesson in urban planning for a pirate capital. Perhaps build on more solid ground next time. Number 2. Nassau, the Flying Gang's Republic of Pirates. This is the one you've probably seen in movies. For a brief, dazzling period from about 1706 to 1718, the port of Nassau on the island of New Providence in the Bahamas was the heart of a true Republic of Pirates. This was the era of some of the most legendary names in piracy: Edward Blackbeard Teach, Charles Vane, Calico Jack Rackham, Anne Bonny, and Mary Read. They called themselves the Flying Gang, and they turned Nassau into a pirate utopia or dystopia, depending on your perspective. Nassau was perfectly situated for piracy. Its harbor was too shallow for large warships, but ideal for the pirates' shallow draft sloops and schooners. The surrounding waters were a maze of reefs and shallow channels, making it easy for pirates to escape pursuing naval vessels. Moreover, it lay directly astride the main shipping lanes for Spanish galleons returning to Europe laden with treasure, and for British, French, and Dutch merchant ships trading with the Americas. The Republic of Pirates wasn't a formal government in the traditional sense, but it had its own rules and a loose democratic structure. Captains were often elected by their crews, and plunder was shared according to agreed-upon articles. Disputes were sometimes settled by duels or councils of captains. It was a society built on defiance of established authority, a place where outcasts and rebels could find freedom and fortune. At its height, over 1,000 pirates may have called Nassau home, operating a fleet of dozens of ships. Life in Nassau was wild. Imagine a town run by pirates, for pirates. It was a constant scene of drinking, gambling, and plotting the next raid. Blackbeard himself was a master of image, cultivating a terrifying persona by tying slow-burning fuses into his massive black beard during battle, wreathed in smoke like a demon. Charles Vane was known for his cruelty and his utter refusal to accept any pardon or surrender to authorities. Anne Bonny and Mary Read defied all conventions of the time, fighting alongside men and earning reputations as fierce pirates in their own right. Pirates of Nassau were audacious. In 1717, Blackbeard blockaded the port of Charleston, South Carolina, holding the entire city hostage until his demands for medical supplies were met. This kind of brazen act showed the power and reach of the Nassau pirates. They effectively controlled the seas around the Bahamas and the American eastern seaboard. Party couldn't last forever. The constant piracy disrupted trade and angered the colonial powers. In 1718, the British sent Captain Woodes Rogers, a former privateer himself, to Nassau, with a fleet and a royal pardon for any pirate who surrendered. Rogers' motto was, Expulsus piratis, restituta commercia. Pirates expelled, commerce restored. Many pirates, including Benjamin Hornigold, Blackbeard's mentor, accepted the pardon. Others, like Charles Vane, defiantly fought their way out and continued their piratical careers. Blackbeard met his end later that year in a fierce battle off North Carolina. By the early 1720s, the Republic of Pirates in Nassau was effectively over, though piracy itself continued. If Nassau joined the United Pirate Nation, it would bring the spirit of the golden age of piracy. It would contribute some of the most iconic figures and their legendary reputations, inspiring fear and perhaps even a strange sort of admiration. Nassau's pirates were masters of hit-and-run tactics with smaller, faster ships, perfect for coastal raiding and disrupting trade. Their knowledge of the Bahamian archipelago and the American coastline would be a huge strategic asset. The Flying Gang model a loose confederation of pirate crews operating from a central haven could be scaled up. Nassau would also contribute its own version of pirate codes and democratic traditions, emphasizing the rights of the common pirate and the elected nature of leadership. They were the rock stars of the pirate world, bringing flair, audacity, and a proven ability to paralyze colonial trade. Their experience in establishing a completely independent pirate society, however short-lived, would be invaluable. Number 1. Libertatia, the Pirate, Utopia of Freedom and Equality. This one is almost too good to be true, and some historians debate whether it actually existed or was a romantic invention. But the story of Libertatia, a supposed anarchist pirate colony founded in Madagascar in the late 17th or early 18th century, is so powerful and influential that it deserves the top spot in any discussion of pirate republics, especially a hypothetical united one. If real, it was centuries ahead of its time. The tale of Libertatia comes primarily from the book A General History of the Pirates, published in 1724 under the pseudonym Captain Charles Johnson, whose true identity is still debated, with Daniel Defoe being a popular candidate. According to this account, Libertatia was founded by a French pirate captain named Misson and a Dominican priest named Caraccioli. Disgusted with the hypocrisy and tyranny of European society, they envisioned a new society based on principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity. Sound familiar? This was long before the French Revolution. In Libertatia, all men were considered equal, regardless of race or nationality. They supposedly abolished slavery, freeing enslaved people from captured ships and inviting them to join their society as equals. Property was held in common, and decisions were made by a democratically elected council. They even created their own language, a sort of pidgin tongue blending various European and African languages. Their motto was said to be, "For God and Liberty," and they waged war against all states that oppressed their people or engaged in the slave trade. Captain Misson and his crew, after renouncing their nationalities, called themselves Liberi Free Men. They captured ships, but instead of simply plundering them, they often tried to convert the crews to their way of life, offering them a place in their egalitarian society. They were particularly hostile to slave ships, attacking them and freeing the captives. Libertatia was supposedly located on the northern coast of Madagascar, perhaps in the Bay of Antongil, a large sheltered bay that was indeed a known pirate haunt. They built fortifications, cultivated land, and established a thriving community. The colony was said to have lasted for about 25 years before being destroyed by an attack from the native Malagasy people. Whether Libertatia was a real place, an exaggerated account of a less idealistic pirate settlement, or a purely fictional utopian tale designed to critique European society, its idea was incredibly potent. It represented the ultimate pirate dream. Not just freedom from the law, but freedom to create a better, fairer world. If Libertatia, or at least its ideals, were to become part of a united pirate nation, its contribution would be monumental. It would provide the ideological backbone, a revolutionary philosophy that could unite diverse pirate groups under a banner far more inspiring than mere plunder. Libertatia would offer a moral compass, a claim that the pirate nation wasn't just about theft, but about creating a new world order based on justice and equality. This would be powerful propaganda, potentially attracting disaffected people from all over the world to their cause. The at least theoretical anti-slavery stance would be revolutionary, setting them apart from many other pirate groups and potentially winning allies among enslaved populations and abolitionist sympathizers. The democratic and communal principles of Libertatia could form the basis for the United Nations Constitution. Its location in Madagascar would give the United Nations a strategic base in the Indian Ocean, extending its reach far beyond the Atlantic and Mediterranean. Libertatia would be the soul of the united pirate nation, transforming it from a mere coalition of criminals into a genuine revolutionary movement. Even if only a legend, the idea of Libertatia could inspire them to build something truly new and radical, a beacon of liberty, as they defined it, in a world of empires and kings. It would be their declaration of independence, their rallying cry for a world remade by pirates, for pirates and perhaps for all the oppressed, a united pirate nation. The ocean's true superpower. So what if these 6 incredible, diverse, and powerful pirate entities somehow overcame their differences in time, culture, and geography to unite? The world would tremble. This wouldn't just be a nuisance. It would be a global maritime superpower capable of challenging established empires on their own terms. Imagine the ruling council grizzled Cilician strategists offering ancient wisdom on fleet movements, sail corsairs sharing centuries of knowledge on sustained raiding economies, and North African politics, Tortuga buccaneers advocating for fierce, independent action, Port Royal's representatives radioing the vast treasury, Nassau's mediate captains rallying the vast treasury, Nassau's mediate captains rallying the crews with tales of daring, and Libertatia's idealists shaping the nation's laws. Capital might be a newly built, incredibly fortified island, perhaps named New Libertalia or Fort Providence, strategically located to control multiple trade routes, combining Cilician engineering, sales defensibility, Port Royal's commercial savvy, and Nassau's elusiveness. Their combined navy would be a terrifying spectacle. Thousands of ships, the swift galleys and ibex of the Mediterranean corsairs, the battle-hardened sloops and schooners of the Caribbean, the heavy raiders familiar to the Cilicians, and purpose-built flagships funded by Port Royal's wealth. This fleet wouldn't just be for raiding. It could engage naval squadrons, blockade entire countries, and project power across oceans. The Indian Ocean contingent, inspired by Libertatia, would disrupt the lucrative East India trade. The Atlantic forces, a mix of sail and Nassau traditions, would control routes to the Americas and Europe. The Mediterranean would once again be a pirate lake, as in Cilician days. The economy of this pirate nation would be multifaceted. Plunder, of course, would be a primary source of income, but they would also control key shipping lanes, levying tolls, or protection money from merchant vessels. A global maritime mafia. They would have vast networks for selling stolen goods, perhaps even establishing their own free trade ports, where illicit commerce thrived openly. The sale model of ransom and a captive labor force, though perhaps modified by Libertatia's ideals towards a more indentured or conscripted system for enemies, would add another revenue stream. Their military forces wouldn't just be sailors. The buccaneers of Tortuga were as much land-based guerrilla fighters as seamen. They could launch amphibious assaults, capture coastal cities, and hold territory. The United Nation could field armies of hardened veterans loyal to their codes and their share of the spoils. Imagine pirate armies marching under a unified banner, perhaps a skull and crossbones superimposed over a broken chain, symbolizing Libertatia's ideals. The laws of this nation would be a unique blend of pirate articles, provisions for democratic election of officers, fair shares of plunder, compensation for injuries, and swift, harsh justice for traitors or those who broke the code. Libertatia's influence might push for broader human rights, at least for its citizens, while the more pragmatic traditions would ensure discipline and effectiveness. Of course, such a nation would face immense challenges. Internal rivalries between different pirate traditions would be a constant threat. Would the deeply religious, albeit in their own way, sail corsairs truly coexist with the atheistic or deistic leanings of some Libertatia founders? Could the individualistic captains of Nassau submit to a centralized Cilician command structure? And the established empires, Britain, Spain, France, the Ottomans, would eventually be forced to unite against this common enemy, launching massive crusades to eradicate them. Yet, for a time, this united pirate nation would be a force unlike any the world had ever seen. It would be a testament to the power of those who live outside the law, a sprawling, chaotic, yet surprisingly organized confederation of sea rovers, driven by greed, a love of freedom, a hatred of tyranny, and perhaps in the case of libertatious dreamers, a genuine desire to build something new. They would be the ultimate rebels, a nation forged in brine and blood, holding the world's commerce hostage and daring anyone to challenge their dominion over the waves. The seas would belong to them,